There is a bowl on your kitchen floor. Ceramic, maybe, or stainless steel. It might have your dog's name painted on the side. You fill it twice a day without thinking about it. The way you fill a kettle, that bowl is the first link in a chain. The food that goes into it is made by a company. Fine, every food is made by a company, but that same company also owns the clinic you drive to when your dog stops eating. It owns the laboratory that tests his blood. It owns the machine that takes the X-ray. It owns the software that reads the X-ray. And when the results come back, and the veterinarian gently slides a bag of prescription food across the counter and tells you this is what he needs now, that company owns that too. 5 steps, 1 owner. And here is the part that should bother you. None of this is hidden. It is published on their own websites, in their own press releases, in filings with the government. You just never had a reason to look. The company is Mars, Incorporated. Yes, that Mars. M&M's, Snickers, Twix, Wrigley's chewing gum. A private, family-owned business that answers to no shareholders, holds no quarterly earnings calls, and publishes no annual report, has quietly become the largest owner of veterinary care in the world. Not a shareholder, not an investor, the owner. Now, I want to be precise about something because it matters. This is not an accusation. There is no lawsuit here. No regulator has found that Mars did anything unlawful. This is an organization chart. It is a diagram of who owns what, and how a chain of ordinary, boring business decisions ended with one company standing on every step between you and your dog's health. By the end of this video, you will know exactly how it was built, what a national competition regulator concluded about it just 4 months ago, and why less than half of the people walking into these clinics have any idea whose building they are standing in. To understand the chain, you have to understand how strange the buyer is. Mars was founded on confectionery, chocolate, chewing gum. For most of the 20th century, that is what it was. But somewhere along the way, Mars developed a second appetite. Pedigree, Whiskas, Caesar, Greenies, Sheba, Nutro, and in 2002, the crown jewel, Royal Canin, a French company that did something the others did not. Royal Canin did not sell food in supermarkets alone. It sold food through veterinarians, prescription diets, therapeutic formulas, bags you could not simply pick up off a shelf because a professional had to tell you to buy them. That distinction is going to matter a great deal in about 6 minutes. Today, Mars Pet Care says it employs around 100,000 people in more than 130 countries. That is not a side business. That is an empire in its own right. But food was only the beginning. In 2007, Mars bought its way into a completely different industry. It acquired Banfield Pet Hospital. If you are American, you have almost certainly walked past a Banfield. More than 1,000 of its clinics sit inside PetSmart stores. You go in for dog food, and there is a veterinary clinic in the back. Banfield became the largest privately owned veterinary practice in the United States. 8 years later, in 2015, Mars added Blue Pearl, a network of emergency and specialty hospitals. The places you drive to at 2 in the morning when it is serious. And then, on January 9th, 2017, Mars did something that made the business press look up from its desk. It agreed to buy VCA. VCA operated more than 1,000 animal hospitals across the United States and Canada. It was publicly traded. The stock ticker, and I promise I am not making this up, spelled the word woof. The price was $9.1 billion. $9.1 billion for animal hospitals, paid by a chocolate company. Now, this deal was large enough that the American competition regulator, the Federal Trade Commission, stepped in. And this is where it gets interesting. On August 30th, 2017, the Federal Trade Commission announced that it would allow the acquisition on one condition. Mars had to sell off 12 veterinary clinics in 10 localities where the regulator believed the deal would remove local competition. 7 Blue Pearl centers, 5 VCA hospitals, sold to rival groups. The final consent order was signed in December of that year. Mars complied. The deal went through. 12 clinics, out of a network that today numbers in the thousands. Because here is what Mars Veterinary Health looks like right now, according to Mars itself. more than 2,500 veterinary clinics and hospitals in more than 20 countries, handling more than 25 million pet visits every single year, staffed by over 70,000 people, including 15,000 veterinarians. 15,000 veterinarians. But here is the thing. The clinics were never the most valuable part. Think about what actually happens at a veterinary appointment. Your dog is unwell. The vet examines him, and then she says the sentence every pet owner learns to dread. We should run some tests. Blood is drawn. A sample is labeled. It goes into a courier bag, and it leaves the building. Where does it go? When Mars bought VCA in 2017, it did not only buy 1,000 hospitals. Bolted onto VCA was a business called Antech Diagnostics. Antech is a laboratory network, and by its own description, it is the largest reference laboratory network in North America, running more than 70 laboratories across the United States. So the sample leaves the clinic and arrives at a laboratory owned by the same company. But it does not stop there. Antech also owns sound, the imaging division, the X-ray equipment, the ultrasound machines, the scanners, the physical hardware sitting in the room. Antech also absorbed a company called Heska, which makes the in-clinic analyzers, the small machines on the counter that give you results in 10 minutes instead of 2 days. And Antech operates a service called Rapid Red, which uses artificial intelligence to interpret routine X-rays in minutes. So let us count. The machine that takes the image, the company that reads the image, the laboratory that processes the blood, the analyzer on the counter, one owner, and now the results come back. Something in the numbers is off. Kidney values, liver enzymes, wait, a sensitivity. The veterinarian says your dog needs a therapeutic diet, a specific formulation, not the supermarket bag. She recommends Royal Canin. Mars, since 2002. Royal Canin sells a dedicated veterinarian product line. And on Royal Canin's own consumer website, alongside Find a Retailer, there is a second button, Find a Vet, so the loop closes. Food, clinic, laboratory, imaging, prescription food. 5 links, 1 owner. And the American Animal Hospital Association put it about as plainly as an industry body can in January of last year. In the veterinary industry, they wrote, Mars holds the lion's share of the marketplace. Now, I want to be very careful here, and I want you to hold me to it. I have found no evidence, none, that Mars instructs its veterinarians to prescribe Royal Canin. No regulator has alleged it, no court has found it, and the veterinarians working in these clinics are, overwhelmingly, people who took on enormous debt to spend their lives keeping animals alive. That is not the story. The story is the structure. Because in every other part of your life, we have decided that this structure requires a warning label. The person who diagnoses you is not supposed to be the same person who profits from the treatment. We built entire bodies of law around that idea. For your dog, nobody built anything, which raises the obvious question. How did all of this happen around you without you noticing? The answer is almost disappointingly simple. They did not change the sign. According to consumer advocate Todd Nemeth, fewer than 15% of corporate veterinary consolidators put their own brand on the practices they buy. The name above the door stays the same. The founder's name, the name of the street, the name of the town. The ownership changes. The signage does not. And we now have hard numbers on how well that works, from a source that spent 2.5 years investigating it. In September of 2023, Britain's Competition and Markets Authority opened a review of the veterinary sector. The response was, in the regulator's own word, unprecedented. 56,000 people wrote in, 45,000 members of the public, 11,000 from inside the profession, roughly 1 in 5 vets and veterinary nurses in the entire country. The review became a full market investigation, and on the 24th of March 2026, it concluded. The chair of the inquiry called it the most extensive review of veterinary services in a generation. The finding, in the regulator's language, was that pet owners were being left in the dark, and that this lack of information was leading to weak competition and high prices. Here are 3 of the numbers they published. Less than 40% of practices listed prices on their websites. Over 70% of pet owners bought long-term medication directly from their vet practice, when many of them could have saved £200 a year or more buying the same medicine online. And this one, less than half of the people using a large veterinary group knew that their practice was part of a chain. Less than half. The regulator named the 6 large veterinary groups it examined. One of them is Linnaeus. Linnaeus is Mars. Now, the regulator did not conclude that these companies broke the law. It concluded that the market was not working, and its remedies are legally binding, in force by the 23rd of September this year. Practices must publish full price lists. Written prescription fees are capped. Any treatment expected to cost £500 or more requires a written estimate in advance. Practices must have written policies protecting a vet's ability to give independent advice, free of commercial pressure. And one more, common ownership must be displayed. On the signage, at the premises, and online. Britain is going to make the sign on the door tell you who owns the building. Across the Atlantic, no such rule exists, and the American market is, if anything, further down this road. The Federal Trade Commission's own economists counted roughly 30,000 veterinary clinics in the United States. The consulting firm BRAC estimated that corporate consolidators controlled almost half the veterinary care market by 2021, around a quarter of general practices, and about 3/4 of specialty practices. And Mars is no longer the only buyer. Private equity has poured tens of billions of dollars into veterinary medicine. National Veterinary Associates, now more than 1,400 hospitals, is owned by an investment holding company. Another group operates 380 clinics. 2 more announced a merger covering 730 practices between them. Meanwhile, the American Veterinary Medical Association reported this February that veterinary prices rose faster than inflation last year. While the number of visits fell by around 3%, prices up, visits down. People are not loving their animals less. They are looking at the estimate and quietly saying no. And the veterinarians themselves? The association's own research found that vets working in corporate clinics reported feeling pressure to generate revenue and to see more clients per shift. Vets in independent practice reported higher job satisfaction, which tells you something important. The people in the white coats are not the ones who built this. Go back to the bowl on your kitchen floor. Nothing about it has changed. Same ceramic, same dog, same 2 meals a day. What changed is the number of people standing behind it. And in about 8 weeks, in one country, a law comes into force requiring somebody to write it down where you can see it. A sign on a door telling you who owns the room you are standing in. That is the whole reform. That is what 2.5 years of investigation and 56,000 letters produced. Somebody has to tell you, which should make you wonder what else has quietly changed owners while the sign stayed the same. The mattress you sleep on, the paint on your walls, the land under the house. Because once you start pulling this thread, it does not stop at the dog.